Being 7:01, I call the Lisle Library District Board meeting for February 17th, 2021 to order. The Lisle Library District recognizes Governor Pritzker's Executive Order number 2021-01, which extends Executive Order 2020-07 as amended by Executive Order 2020-33 and Executive Order 2020-44, the January 8th, 2021 Disaster Proclamation and the Government Emergency Administration Act number 100-06-40, which suspends certain requirements of the Open Meetings Act, allowing library trustees to participate remotely. All motions will require a roll call vote. So can I have roll call, please?
Marjorie Bartelli.
Here.
Thomas Duffy.
Here.
Thomas Hummel.
Here.
Karen Larson. Here. Jenny Norton.
Here.
Sullivan.
Is that me, Liz? Here.
Emily Sustad.
Here.
Is that good? All right, next item on the agenda is opportunity for visitors to speak. Is there anybody in the room, Tatiana?
No.
No. Is there anybody online?
No.
And no emails?
No.
All right. So seeing none, there is no opportunity or no visitors for public comment. Next item on the agenda is assignments for reviewing monthly accounts payable. This past month, Vice President Bartelli substituted for me and Trustee Duffy reviewed the January billings in February. Next month, Secretary Swistak and Trustee Sullivan will review the February billings in March. The next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. If anybody wants anything pulled from the consent agenda, let me know. If not, can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Okay, Trustee Sullivan,
Second. Trustee Duffy.
Trustee Duffy, second. Any questions, comments, or discussion on the consent agenda? Being none, can I have roll call, please?
Liz Sullivan.
Aye.
Thomas Duffy.
Aye.
Karen Larson.
Aye.
Jenny Norton.
Aye.
Emily Sustad.
Aye.
Marjorie Bartelli.
Aye.
Thomas Hummel.
Aye. Motion passes. Next item on the agenda is unfinished business, 5A1, preliminary financial sourcing analysis discussion, PMA and CCS. Director Weinstein, you want to start or should I just hand it off to Andrew?
Well, I'll just introduce
Okay.
Andrew again from
Okay.
PMA. And I know that we are going to, we anticipate Robert Luce to join us in a few moments, but Andrew, I'll hand it off to you.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I can start showing or sharing my screen now.
Yep, you're good.
And everyone can see it?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you very much for having me and hopefully soon Bob and me. We're certainly very appreciative of the opportunity to work with the library, and hopefully what we present here tonight will give the library some options, the library board some options to consider regarding your financing options. So what we started off with was this page here, page 2, which is an analysis of the library's fund balance. Now, primarily we're looking at the general fund balance here, but you'll see the last point of this slide also addresses the balance that's available in your special reserve fund as well. But primarily I want to focus on what the fund balance currently is and how using funds in your general fund balance might impact not only the financing, but the available fund balance moving forward in the general fund. And so we look here at the past 3 years of fund balances and expenditures, and we calculate the fund balance as a percentage of the general fund expenditures. That's really the way that the rating agencies look at how healthy your fund balance might be. So obviously it's been increasing over the last several years, 118, 127, and as of June 30, 2020, it was 130% of your general fund expenditures. So given that your fund balance is roughly $4.8 million, we did a very quick and simple analysis that says, well, if the library decides to use a portion of that fund balance towards the proposed project, how much would that leave? And what percentage of that would it be as a percentage of the 2020 expenditures? So if the library chose to use $500,000 of the 4.8 million, you would be left with 4.3 million, which is 117%. The library chooses to use $1.5 million, you'd be left with $3.3 million, which is 90%. If the library chose to use $2 million, you'd be left with $2.8 million, which is 77%. And if the library chose $2.5 million, you'd be left with $2.3 million, which is 63% of the 2020 general fund expenditures. So our note here, our comment here is that the library could utilize as much as $2 million of the fund balance in its general fund, and doing so would maintain an available fund balance of at least 75% of your general fund expenditures. And the reason why we focus on that metric, that 75% metric, is because having a history of 75% of fund balance, of at least 75% rather, may leave the library eligible for a rating notch upgrade by S&P. Now, there's nothing set in stone that it will be given the rating notch upgrade, but it is part of their methodology to provide that rating notch upgrade if there is a history of at least 75% of available fund balance. Of course, they are at liberty to, provide whatever rating they deem appropriate for the library.
And just so I want to mention that I see Robert has joined us. So did you want to introduce Robert?
Yeah, thanks Bob for joining us. Bob is a colleague of mine at PMA. He actually heads the department, so he's not just a colleague, he signs my checks as well. So welcome, Bob.
Thank you. Sorry I was a little late. I was wrapping up another meeting.
It's okay.
So I'm on slide 2. Bob, I think you should be able to see the presentation.
Yes, I can.
Okay, so I'm on slide 2 here. And then, the last comment, which I briefly mentioned earlier, is that in addition to the fund balance available in the general fund, the library also has $3.9 million as of December 31st, 2020, available in its special reserve fund, presumably to use for projects exactly like the one that the library is considering. So when we came up with our financing and alternatives here, we made some assumptions. The first assumption was that the library would contribute that $2 million from the general fund. The second assumption is that the library would contribute $3 million of the available $3.9 million in its special reserve fund. Obviously, you can contribute more or less from either of those funds as the library deems fit. And then we said, assuming those contributions from both the general fund and the special reserve fund, how much would the library need to finance in a bond or debt certificate issue if the total project amounts are A, $8.5 million, B, $9.75 million, and C, $11 million. So simple math tells you that the assumed contributions in aggregate would be $5 million, and therefore the financing scenarios that we provide are assuming a borrowing of $3.5 million, a borrowing of $4.75 million, and then a borrowing of $6 million. So the three following this slide here shows what the annual payments might be for a borrowing of each size. Again, we have the $3.5 million borrowing, the $4.75 million borrowing, and the $6 million borrowing. Now, we do make certain assumptions about these structures as well. First of all, we assume that the library receives a AA credit rating from S&P. Second of all, we assume that the final term of the financing is in 20 years. Third, we assumed interest rates as of February 9th of this year, but we also added 0.5% or 50 basis points to our analysis because when the library actually sells its bonds, obviously we don't know exactly where the market will be at that point. The final assumption that we made is that the annual payments that the library would be making in order to pay back this financing is roughly equal in each year. In reality, you'll be making these payments on a semi-annual basis, but what we show here are the aggregate annual payments that the library would be making. So for a $3.5 million project, $3.5 million financing for an $8.5 million project, the annual payments would be roughly $224,000 per year. For a $4.75 million financing, the annual payments would be roughly $303,000 per year. And for a $6 million financing, the annual payments would be approximately $382,000 per year. And we also provide here the estimated TIC. You might consider this kind of like your APR on your mortgage rate, on your home mortgage. It's an aggregate rate that represents the total cost of the financing for the library. When the bonds are actually sold, each year will have its own maturity, or each year is its own maturity, and each maturity has its own interest rate. The estimated TIC here is just the aggregate of all of those. So as you might imagine, the interest rate associated with the 2041 maturity would actually be greater than 2.40%, and the interest rate for the 2022 maturity would actually be lower than 2.4%. And in aggregate, for each of these financings, it would be, or each of these scenarios rather, it would be 2.4%. So now, given that we know, generally speaking, what the annual payments would be for each of these financing scenarios, the question is, can the library afford any one of these? Or if not, what can the library afford? So the next 3 slides will show kind of the affordability level that the library has for each of these scenarios. And again, we look at the last 3 years of the library's financials to determine how much the library can actually afford. And we start off by realizing that the library has contributed over the past 3 years roughly $300,000 to $350,000 per year to the Special Reserve Fund. And then we assume that the library will use these funds in order to finance the project, the borrowing for the project. So we see here the transfers out of the general fund to the Special Reserve Fund are exactly equal to the revenues coming into the Special Reserve Fund. Pretty simple assumption there. And then we say, okay, what would be the expenses out of the Special Reserve Fund using the revenues that are coming from the general fund? In this situation, because we're looking at the $8.5 million project, which is the $3.5 million borrowing, the annual payments would be approximately $224,000. And essentially, we're asking the question, over the past 3 years, would the library have been able to afford annual payments of $224,000 in addition to what we call here annual contingency expenses, which are just any additional expenses that might come up that the library or any of us are not anticipating as a result of the project. And then you'll see here we have this third line under expenses that is shaded slightly darker green, and it's zeroed out in each year. So what we're saying is, what would the library want to target as savings for the Special Reserve Fund, given that a majority of it has now been spent down in order to fund the project? So once we take into account all of these expenses in the Special Reserve Fund, we see that there's net revenues in the Special Reserve Fund of $110,000, $60,000, and $60,000. And then we look at, in aggregate, inclusive of both the general fund surplus and what might be available in the Special Reserve Fund, how much does the library then have in surplus on an annual basis? So assuming this financing took place over the last 3 years, the library would have comfortably been able to afford the payments on this $3.5 million borrowing. That's essentially what we're saying, because we see here that these numbers are, in the several hundreds of thousands of dollars on an annual basis. Obviously, as the borrowing, as both the borrowing amount and the project amount increases, we would expect these numbers to come down. And as we move to the $9.75 million project, that's exactly what we see. We are assuming the same contributions that actually happened throughout the last 3 years. Of course, the debt service on the financing increases to a little bit over $300,000. And when we include the contingency expenses of $15,000, we realize that the contributions from the general fund to the special reserve fund, or the transfers rather, of $300,000 are not adequate to make all of the expenses that are coming out of the special reserve fund. Now, on an aggregate basis, there's still some capacity that the village can, or that the library can manage. So in a situation like this, the library may want to, instead of contributing $300,000 to its special reserve fund, may want to transfer $350,000 or something like that. Obviously, then the net revenues in the special reserve fund would be positive in each year, and there would still be net operating revenues for the library in aggregate after the renovation. And then going to the $11 million project, which coincides with the $6 million financing, we see that this is a much, much tighter financial situation for the library. You'd have to contribute roughly, $400,000 to the special reserve fund, and it would only leave, $90,000 approximately as of, using the 2020 numbers in excess for the library. Having said that, is this something that is manageable for the library? One thing that I would say is, working in the library's favor is, this slide here. Even with the $2 million contribution, there's still 77% available as fund balance as a percentage of your general fund expenditures. So, this is a very, very healthy rainy day fund, if you will. And if the library wanted to be slightly more ambitious with a larger project, having a rainy day fund like this certainly makes the pursuit of that more ambitious project a little bit more realistic. So that was the presentation we prepared for you. If there are any questions, we'd certainly be happy to answer them.
Do any trustees have any questions or comments? Treasurer Norton, I see your hand first. Okay.
Thank you. First of all, may I call you Andrew? Is that all right?
Yeah. Andrew's fine. Yep.
Andrew.
Hi.
Great to have you back, Andrew. And pardon the background music from my daughter.
Sure.
She has not rehearsed tonight yet, so we may get some more during the questions. But if I may just ask, first of all, thank you. Great presentation. May I just sort of ask a few questions or clarification points along the way?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. Starting right up from the first slide where you mentioned the recommendation for the 75% threshold, because, and I know no promises, but you've seen in your experience that tends to lend the possibility of an S&P ratings upgrade 1 notch, you said?
Correct.
So if there were to, first of all, is the TIC rate that you put into the scenarios on the slide 2 more after that, is that
Sure.
including the potential bump or excluding the potential bump?
It is excluding.
So it is conservatively not. It's what it's your best guess of what our rating would be, which you said was AA, and that's before any potential 1 notch up for the 75% threshold.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then the next question that I had was, and I should have written it down, was, pardon the cat singing as well. What would, in your experience, if we were to get a ratings bump of 1, what would that translate to in basis points? How much would we save in basis points from what you here? So if
Yeah,
2.4, well, all centers 2.4, what would that look like instead?
yeah, I would say it's probably around in the 10 to 20 basis point range, so 0.1 to 0.2%. Obviously,
Okay.
that fluctuates, but probably in that range. So it could bring it down to 230, could bring it down to as low
Okay.
as 220. Now, again, this TIC includes the 50 basis point cushion as well.
Yes,
So
understood.
yeah,
And then, sorry to make you do quick math. I don't know if you are like me and you count on Excel to do it, but would that 10 basis points, what would be the correlation? Like how would that
yeah,
come through to the average annual debt service? If like the $8.5 million, the 3.5 million borrowing scenario is somewhere in the range of like 220,000 per year.
sure. I
Shave
have
off.
my handy dandy calculator here, so I'll do some real quick math if you don't mind giving me a minute here.
Sure.
If the rest of the group doesn't mind a little bit of crunching on live.
So I'm going to use the $3.5 million scenario first. That's PV, and then let's assume you want to assume a 10%, a 0.10% reduction. So
Yes,
we'll say
please.
215, so 225.
Yep.
Okay, 2.25 interest rate. 20-year amortization, and we're looking at around $219,000 per year instead of 220.
Okay. So it doesn't, it's not a life-changing annualized savings.
Not life-changing, no.
All right. Thank you. I wanted to understand.
I can do it for the $6 million one. Obviously, it'll be a little bit more substantive for the $6 million one because you're talking about a larger.
Sure, and trust me, I'm a penny pincher from way back, personally and professionally. So I'm not at all, unhappy to save in any way possible. Just wanted to know what the impact is generally, and that was helpful.
Yeah.
And then just wanted to get clarifications on the next slide from where you are. Sorry, I'm not, it's slide 5, it's our page 44. I didn't want to get lost
Got
in
it.
numbering.
Yeah, no problem.
So I just want to make sure I understand the flow of what you're showing here. I may have not, in terms of the nomenclature of some of the lines, the rows that you have. So
Sure.
This was, you basically took a hypothetical and said, if we took 2018 to 2020 actuals, your actual cash flow, then took to that scenario to say, okay, what if instead of reality we had, and instead of your regular fundings of special reserve, we incorporated this debt service in sort of the second section of the chart. Then where would you land in terms of surplus or deficit for that year's cash flow? Am I there? Bottom line, okay, that is what we're showing there. And so what I see for the most part is that it's the operating, the general fund that really generates most of the surplus anyway. There wasn't, what you get in terms of net positive in any given year of this hypothetical for the special reserve is a smaller portion of that overall, right? So if in like the 2018 column, you're looking at the subtotal of 455, and then you're looking at the subtotal of 110 from the special reserve section. So the portion of the cushion that you're getting is mostly from operations, right?
Correct.
Okay.
That's
all right.
correct.
So I just making sure I understood all of that. And I want to open the other the board members without a finance background to feel free to ask for further clarification for the non-finance brains that are out there. This was sufficient for me to get a better understanding, but we don't have to stop here. So that was sufficient for me, and I turned it over to the rest of the group.
Okay. I think Trustee Duffy, your hand was next, and then Trustee Sullivan, you'll be next. Trustee Duffy?
Thank you, Andrew.
Sure.
Quick question for you. So in the projection that you have, or the hypothetical, sorry, we have how much do you project in our special reserve before? Was it 3.9 or 3.6? I think it was in the.
Well, I think as of fiscal year end 2020 and June 30, 2020 was closer to 3.6 maybe or something like that. But Tatiana was able to provide me the financials as of December 31st, 2020, which showed a $3.9 million balance in the special reserve fund.
Okay. So then, in essence, independent of the three scenarios that you provide, you're assuming that we're leaving at least $900,000, probably more time, something like this, if we were to choose any of them, still within the special reserve fund. That would be there, right? Because you're not saying that we're going to use all 3.9 million in your hypothetical assumptions that you have here.
Correct. In my hypotheticals, we're assuming a $3 million contribution from the special reserve fund, leaving, as you suggested, approximately $900,000.
And if I may jump in these 3 years of the hypothetical, each year we are replenishing that special reserve by a certain amount in the 8.5 million scenario on that last green row, 110 net, that's being transferred, after, when you say, 349 transferred less what you spent on debt service equals 110, 204, 6825, 6832. Andrew?
That is correct. Yep.
So I guess I have a question, if you don't mind going back to the first slide. I know you just were there.
Sure. No problem.
You're going to get used to those arrow keys. So you talk about what the general fund, like what you need the percentage of. I guess my question is then, that's very clear to me. Like you want the 75% or higher, crystal clear. But then when I think about the special reserve fund is, I guess, and we've had, I know we've had a little bit of conversation about like, what dollar amount would you want recommended in that too? Because if I see more than $1 million sitting in that account, then, and we're doing all of this, which probably the special reserve fund is either truly a rainy day fund or something such as a major renovation fund, right? Like those kind of seem to be the two main thrusts of why you have this type of fund. Can you give any kind of general guidance like what you would expect to see in that going forward? Too much?
Well,
too?
Yeah. I mean, I would say I see the general fund balance as more of a rainy day fund. I see the special reserve fund balance more as, or special reserve fund more as a means to address future capital projects that are planned, right? So if the library has projects that it's expecting or maintenance on the new project that it's expecting, planned maintenance, then, we would want that information to inform the library of how much to leave in the special reserve fund. In terms of a pure kind of rainy day, we don't know. We want to have monies available to us in case something happens that we don't expect or we're not planning for. I would say that's what the 77% in the general fund balance is for. So, having said that, how much do you want to keep in your special reserve fund? I can't really answer that directly. I would say if you do have certain projects planned or certain planned maintenance, then, you would want to see what those are, see how much they might be over the next 5 to 6 to 7 years, and then fund the special reserve fund accordingly.
So I guess I took, maybe this is for you, President Hummel, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this one, is sort of like a to-do is what projects would we potentially want to do maybe post-renovation on that? And that guides to what your question, Andrew, or your statement right there, which is exactly how much money do we need in this fund. Because I imagine the difference of, let's say, hypothetically, you take another $400,000 or $500,000 out of here, does impact what your projection modeling had in those three scenarios. And
Yeah.
So thank you for walking me through that. I wanted to make sure I read that correctly. But that was sort of a takeaway that I took from that. It was like, we need to identify, that's probably a very critical element to now choosing what, even any path we want to do on the financing.
So I'll just jump in and kind of follow up with Trustee Duffy briefly. So you're kind of going down the line of questioning I'm going to have here in a couple minutes or in a second or two. But the other thing I'll just say in general, I think the plan with this project is to take care of any renovations, repairs, etc., for up to the next decade. So I mean, I'll get to my questions when it's my time, but it's kind of going down the line. Questioning Trustee Duffy has is, I don't know if we need to keep that much in special reserve if we're going to be taking care of a lot of issues in this project. So I'll follow up more with that when I get to my turn to ask questions. Trustee Duffy, are you good, or you're good? Okay. Trustee Sullivan, you're on mute, I think.
I agree with both Trustee Duffy and President Hummel.
Mhm.
Doesn't happen all the time, but I was actually going to ask if there was, the recommendation to keep almost $1 million in the special reserve and why we would need that. So I guess that's a discussion to have as a group. And then I also wanted to ask Andrew just a clarification question so that I make sure that I'm understanding this chart and I'm actually on the page that you're on. When it says, and I'm particularly interested in the line that we're talking about, the 77% line.
Yep.
Does this chart say that at the end of the fiscal year, we'll have 77% left?
No, this says if $2 million had been extracted from the general fund balance as of the end of 2020 fiscal year, you would have had 77% left. So it's not projecting into the future for fiscal year 2021 or any other year. It's actually more, I guess, looking back, hypothetically saying if $2 million had been extracted from where the fund balance was at 2020, it would have been 77%.
Okay, and I'm sure you've worked with different organizations that get tax revenue, and you probably are well aware that that tax revenue does not come in monthly.
Correct. Yes.
It comes in usually, twice a year?
Yes.
How's the fact that we get revenue twice a year? Our expenses are not always flat every month. They, salary probably is, and that's probably 75% of our expenses. There are some things that we pay annually, like some of the databases we only pay once a year. So does it matter, and do all those concerns enter into how much we can borrow?
Yeah, I think you raise a very good point. So you're really asking, what does the library's cash flow look like in terms of, revenues and expenditures, or maybe another way of putting it, the fund balance may have been $4.8 million at the end of fiscal year 2020 on June 30, 2020 at a point in time. But is that necessarily the low point for the library's fund balance? And I think that is a pretty astute question. Obviously, I have not taken a look at exactly what the library's cash flow situation looks like, so I don't know exactly when the library's low point is. But certainly, we would want to take that into account. I would say from a rating perspective, from a rating perspective, they do look at that moment in time, the June 30, 2020 moment in time. Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, I was just going to make that point. Is the rating agencies know that your fiscal year end is not necessarily your lowest cash point, but they do the analysis on the date that you choose to have your fiscal year end, and they're going to look at it at that, knowing that different times of the year you're going to have higher and lower cash balances. Yeah, your lowest point is probably going to occur in May before you get that June 1st distribution from DuPage County, and your highest point is going to be in September. But generally speaking, they focus on your fund balance at the fiscal year end, knowing that generally for most taxing bodies in the Chicago metro area and others, there's going to be those high points, but it's 75% fund balance is going to be high enough to manage your low points in your cash flow throughout the year.
Well, I was hoping that, bringing the wash rag dry here, I was hoping to get 6 million out of a combination of the general fund and the special reserve, therefore lessen the amount we borrow. So that's where all these questions are coming from.
Yeah, and one of the comments Andrew and I made, if I could comment on that one, Andrew,
Sure.
when we were talking with the administration, is the 75% target shouldn't necessarily be the most driving force on what you decide to contribute. That's just a data point we wanted to share with you, that is a threshold in the rating analysis. But as one of the other members pointed out astutely earlier, when the 10 basis points or so that you might save doesn't translate into a whole lot of dollars if it's more important for you to contribute more than $2 million. And you might be able to contribute more than $2 million depending on fiscal year 21 ends up. As Andrew said, this is as of fiscal year into 2020. If you have a surplus in 2021, well, that means you're going to have a little bit more money you contribute to the project, and you might be able to get to the 6 million or beyond and still achieve the 75% for the rating. But I certainly wouldn't make meeting that 75% objective as the only variable that you use to determine the cash contribution.
Or even the primary driver for that decision. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Those was really my question. Thank you.
Any other trustees with a question or comment?
Just one little follow-up question, which is that, as we were talking about the special reserve and Trustee Sullivan's comments about, making sure that the special reserve funding balance is not too much for our projected needs. That begs the question, what are our projected needs? We did have the FQC analysis. My belief was that was going to be rolled into, this project to the extent possible, so that we sort of take care of everything that needs to be repaired and renovated within the time frames that were laid out in the FQC report, so that we kind of, not that we have nothing ever to do again, but certainly for the foreseeable future after this renovation process, that we then don't have anything that's lingering in the near term that we need to keep considerable reserves for. So if that becomes the case, then I'm just kind of wondering, what is the source committee group or consultant to kind of take a look at and analyze what our special reserve funding needs should be post-project? Is that start with our facility committee? Is that part of our financial advisor support? Is that part of our owners reps, helping us out, calling you out, Graham? Sorry. So who gets to draw the stick to work on this?
Anybody want to answer that question, or Treasurer Norton, you want to unmute? I don't know if you are you done with your question?
Yeah, that was the question. It's, who, does it go to the finance committee? Does it go back to me as treasurer? Who's responsible for analyzing the special reserves needs post-project?
Yeah, what I've seen, like when we worked with Palatine Library, who had a similar financing situation as yours, is the capital needs were developed and identified over the next 5 to 10 years. And then from there, you determine which ones are being paid for as part of this project. And then whatever's remaining, that would be pay as you go through payments from the special reserve fund. So that analysis has to occur. And once that has occurred, then Andrew and I can work with you to determine probably the proper amount you need to fund those projects, remaining projects that you anticipate over the next 10 years, plus a reasonable amount of cushion to leave for unforeseen circumstances.
If I could, just on the same topic, that, there has been some discussion about possibly some intergovernmental agreements in the future. And I'm not talking about anytime soon, but it could be 5-10 years down the line. And it would involve one of the lots adjacent to our property, things like that. So just thinking really long range and not depleting completely our special reserve, or at least contributing to it in a proper manner year to year. Just looking really long term if we were to pursue any other projects like that. Just to keep them in our back pocket or in our minds when we talk about these things.
Any other trustees? If not, I'll take a shot. Okay, so it's I'll go next then. So back on you're actually on the right page. I wouldn't mind seeing if you could do even a 50% fund balance, which I guess would probably be around $3 million, because it looks like every 13 to 14% is about $500,000. But if you could just probably confirm that when we meet again.
Sure.
And the next slide, and this is probably kind of going in line with Trustee Duffy and Trustee Sullivan, is how you have the $3 million special reserve contribution, maybe do one for $3.5 million.
Sure.
And I don't know if I mean, maybe even do one for the whole thing, 3.9 million, even though that would probably be unlikely to do that much. But I mean, because I probably wouldn't go down to 50% of reserves and zero out special reserves, but it's probably good to just look at all scenarios,
Yeah, so kind of get kind of a
Yes.
capacity.
Yeah,
maximum
so
capacity type
correct, and
situation.
so we could borrow the least amount possible.
Right.
And then on the next slide, which is your page 4, I know you got 3.5, 4.75, and $6 million for bond proceeds. Maybe do one for 3 million and 2.5 million.
3 million and 2.5 million, you said?
Yeah, if you could.
Okay.
And then on the next few pages, your slides 5 through 7. Now, when we meet again, are you going to have like a forecast for like future years, perhaps like for the next, at least the next 3 to 5 years, for example? I mean, I know it would only be a projection or a forecast, but would you have something like that going forward?
Sure. Well, absolutely. I know that the library has requested that we generate an analysis like that, which we're willing and able to do. It does take a little bit longer to do something like that than the analysis that we put together for this presentation. So
Sure.
I guess it depends on, when the next time we would be meeting is.
Director Ryan, would you probably say it would be the next board meeting in March, or there wouldn't be a need for finance? It would just be probably the regular board meeting, right?
I think that's March 17th. And I think also a lot of what we discussed on the next agenda item, I think will contribute to more ideas for this funding project.
I agree. Sorry.
Yeah, so if it's in mid-March, I think, is that the date that you mentioned?
Yeah, I think it was March 17th, Tatiana, did you say?
Yeah.
Yeah, we could probably, and then you would probably actually have to have the analysis for board packets about a week prior to that.
5 days, yes.
5 days. I think we could probably manage that. So that gives us roughly 3 weeks, right?
Great.
3-4 weeks, yeah, about 4 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah, about 4 weeks. That's pretty, I think that's all of my questions and comments. Did any of the other trustees have any follow-up comments or any other comments? Don't want to put anybody on the spot. I don't know if Secretary Swistak or Vice President Bartelli or Trustee Larson have anything, or you guys all good?
Yeah.
Rest of the trustees good? Director Weinstein, you have any questions?
No.
All right. Andrew, do you have anything else you want to wrap it up, or anything else you want to add or anything?
Not off the top of my head. No, I
Okay.
think it was a pretty thorough discussion, so I appreciate that.
All right. All right. Well, thank you we appreciate that. It's a good preliminary information. So we'll look forward to next month too.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank
All
you very
right.
much. Again, we appreciate the opportunity to work with the library, and hopefully, the financings are all executed smoothly and without problem.
Great.
All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you. Disconnect the presenter mode, and then I can make.
I'm sorry, say that again. Do I need to do?
Discontinue the presenter mode, or do I just? Oh, there we go.
Okay.
Thank you.
All righty.
And I will make.
All right. So the next item. Oh, you got to put Graham on.
No,
Next?
no, no.
Well-
I'm going to make John a presenter so we can make this nice and smooth.
Okay,
All right.
All right, so
Thank you
then-
so much, everyone.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
great job, guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So the next item on the agenda is 5A2, concept review discussion, SNH and CCS. Director Weinstein, you want to say anything, or you want me to just throw it to the architects and Graham?
Graham's going to start off.
Graham? Okay, Graham, it's all yours.
Right, thank you. Well, since we last met, I know Eric and Don have been extremely busy and looking at all sorts of possible solutions out there. And I think it's great what they've come up with, and I think you'll be excited when you see it. And I think there's a lot of possibilities there and a lot of choices to be made, not tonight, but at some point in time. So I think we hand over to you, Don, or Eric, which?
Yep, I'll take care of it. Eric will.
Okay,
back me up when I
so
get
great.
to
We're
it.
looking forward to seeing it, Don. You want to?
Yep, tell me if you, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Yep.
Okay, great. I know we had a little trouble with the loading the last time, so as I go through these, I'll ask if you have the image to look at. If not, let me know. We'll see how it goes tonight. So the first image that you should see is labeled West Entry Concept Upper Floor. This is a refinement of the floor plan that we had shown to you at the last board meeting. The significant changes that are shown here compared to what we had shown you on at the last meeting have to do with the site. And you may recall in our earlier scheme, if you can see where I'm pointing, we had kind of a turnaround drop off at the entry located here. We also had the possibility of a drive-up window on this side as well. Well, as we started to take a closer look at what that meant in terms of parking near the entry to the building, it seemed very unsatisfactory. The other thing to keep in mind is that there's a pretty good grade change between the curb here and getting up to the level where you come into the building. It's probably about 3 to 4 feet that we have to make up there. So in this option, we took out that turnaround drop-off piece. We took out the drive-up window that was located here. We located the drive-up window down to the north side of the building, and I'll show that when I go to the other floor plan. And then we'll also show you tonight some options for what it means if we left those two pieces in place, if we left the turnaround in place and if we left the drive-up window up here on top. So those are the significant changes. And I'm going to zoom in on this floor plan so that it's a little easier to see. Everybody see that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so again, in this plan, the scheme is very similar to what we had shown the last time. We're starting to develop it a little bit more as far as considering where we locate things like the service desk and the youth services. But again, just to get you oriented to the plan, here's a covered entry piece that you come into, and then through the vestibule, enter the building here. There's a new monumental stair that's located in the corner here. This kind of large open lobby space that includes the main service desk and checkout here. In this plan, we've also reconfigured this area at the back here. You may recall in the earlier plan, we had the toilet rooms that kind of faced out towards the lobby. Well, instead now we've added an elevator here. This could be an optional elevator. It doesn't have to be in here, but we found a spot for it that we think works well in terms of the floor plan. And that's something that as we move forward with this, we can price that and consider whether it's something we want to keep in the project or not. I think the other benefit of this reconfiguration is that the circulation office space now is much more open directly to the lobby space here as well. The rest of the floor plan, most of it is a youth services area that's shown over here. We have a teen collection that's kind of near the entry into the youth services area. There's a vending area that's located across from the lobby here. And then this large central space that includes periodicals and lounge seating and local history. We've moved the public toilet rooms around the corner to this spot here. And in this scheme, we're relocating the meeting room from the area at the far east end of the building. We're relocating it off of the lobby here. This is something that we talked about at the last meeting. One of the other improvements that we've made here, we think, is putting in a new wall here that separates the public area from the private area. So everything behind this door is really staff related. It includes the staff lounge at this level. It includes the administrative offices that are located in the east end of the building here as well. We thought this was a nice way of kind of cleaning up this end of the building here. We want to confirm, how feasible, whether that is feasible as we work through the program and make sure we accommodate all of the seating and collections and everything else that we need to accommodate in this space. But it's an idea that we think could be made to work and could be an improvement in the plan. Okay, I'm going to move down to the lower level floor. Okay, so just for reference, this dashed line that you see around the end of the building, that represents where your existing building comes out to right now. So this represents the portion of the building that we're proposing to demolish. And then on the lower floor, here you can see that we've moved the drive-up window to this north facade here. Given that this is a fairly wide road down here right now, and that it's one way in the westward direction, it actually works out very well for a drive-up window. The disadvantage of this is that the circulation office is separated from the circulation department, which is located upstairs. But it's not completely isolated. You can see that it's part of this area, which is really all staff back here. And we think that one of the potential benefits of separating the area between public and staff with this wall here, the existing elevator then, it needs to be accessible by the public who's coming to the administrative offices. However, on a daily basis, this elevator will really function as kind of a staff service elevator more so than a public elevator. So going back to the floor plan, this is the stair from up above that comes down. You land in the corner down here. We have a couple of study rooms. We concentrated the collections and the study rooms along the north facade where we have access to natural light along here. The service desk is located more or less in the center of the floor plan here. This is that spot where we have the new elevator that we're proposing to put into the building. And then on the far east end, you can see that we're taking out the existing meeting room, the existing toilet rooms, really everything on this east end of the building except for the existing mechanical room. And in its place, we're putting in the administrative offices. The other difference in this plan is that we've also located tech services down here and the receiving area directly adjacent to tech services. That gives us access to the parking lot off of the east end of the building. Again, this is one of these things that, given the way the grade lines up here, this works out well. So one of the benefits of making these changes in terms of the site that we talked about, sorry, I'll come to that in a second, is that you may recall when we presented this last month, we talked about how it's nice if we can get the pedestrian access into the building really separated from the vehicular access to the building. And so this plan really does that very well. We've now got the drive-up window located, on the other side of the building at a floor lower. We've got the service and receiving area located at the east end, both of which are separated from the main entry to the building. And so this plan really prioritizes convenience for people coming to the library, getting as much parking near the entry as we can. The other thing we took a look at is the parking configurations. And so, parking is not something we've talked a lot about in previous presentations, but we took a closer look at it for this study to make sure that we were addressing this adequately. And so this shows the existing parking configuration that you have on the site right now. So keep in mind, again, your entry is at the east building right now. You have 39 spaces out here, and then this other lot at the far south end that has an additional 14 spaces, which we understand is really not used much for parking. Its real value to the library right now might be for outdoor programming that you have. So one of the things to keep in mind is that with that new outdoor program area that we have off of our entry to the building, that should really allow you to use this parking for those big events that you have periodically throughout the year. So you have 39 spaces here, 54 along the south lot, 23 along the north lot. And we're not exactly sure how these spaces actually get used, but we doubt that they're used by the public very often because they really are isolated from the rest of the building. I'm going to flip back quickly to the floor plan that we're proposing here, and just again bring your attention to that outdoor program space that we have at the west end of the building right now, which will be should be a much nicer environment than the asphalt lot down at the south end of the parking. And then the other thing I think that this plan does with this this outdoor program space and the terrace that comes down to the north side of the building, these parking spaces on the north side of the building, which currently seem very isolated from everything, won't be as isolated. This should actually be a very nice kind of, you're going up a floor, but it's kind of a nice walk to get from the north parking lot up to the entry to the building. So we think that this plan also puts these north parking spaces kind of in play for public use in a way that they aren't right now. So the parking then in our proposed plan, we have 35 parking spaces along the south side of the building. We still identified the 14 parking spaces that we have at the south end here. We pick up about 9 parking spaces in this east end of the building because we no longer have the building entry here, and then we have the 23 parking spaces that are shown on the north side here. So if we do a comparison of this plan to what you have right now, currently you have a total of 130 parking spaces. This plan shows 120 parking spaces. However, again, I want to mention that of the 130 you have right now, 14 don't get used during big events, which is when you need them the most.
Oh,
So we think, I'm sorry?
We use more than that 14 for the big event, but.
So we thought that this was, as far as providing sufficient parking for the programs that you have at the library, that this was a reasonable way to deal with that. Okay, now I'm going to talk about a couple of alternate ideas to the plans that I just showed you. So on this plan, the alternate ideas include that one-way drop-off. We have had discussions with our civil engineer about that grade change that I was talking about. And one of the things that happened as a result of that, that motivated us to take a different look at this, was that in order to make up that grade change, this lane became much longer than it was in the earlier schemes that we had shown. And that's so that this is a reasonable grade to get off and make sure that you can get a car directly next to the entry, so it's convenient for somebody to walk out and directly under the covered entry. But the net result was that it made this lane much longer than it was in the earlier scheme. And then you can see this is where the drive-up window is shown. And so in this scheme, if we were to go this direction, we really lose all of the parking in the south lot along the north side of the drive aisle here. One of the other changes that's shown in this plan is a different configuration for the stairway and the service desk. I'll zoom in a little bit so it's easier to see that. So in this plan, we've taken the stair out of the corner over next to the entry, and we've moved it more internally into the lobby space, and then moved the service desk a little bit closer to the entry than it was in the other scheme. In this scheme, we've also relocated the elevator to a spot here. So I think both this and the other scheme work well. From our point of view, we like the other scheme because you get kind of a nice, big, clean lobby space in here. It doesn't feel as if you get a kind of pinch point, if you will, as you move through the building and, you know, around to the youth services area or back to the meeting room and the other areas of the building here. But otherwise, this plan is much the same as the other plan that we had shown. Going to drop down to the lower floor.
Could I just ask a quick question?
Sure.
Okay, if I'm going to drop somebody off, it looks like I'm on the south side of the building and I'm heading east. So am I making a backwards left-hand turn to drop somebody off?
Yes, in this scheme you are. Now, I think in this scheme, we could also take a look, you know, and the reason for that is because of the drive-up window being located here. So this allows you in this one-way direction to get up to the drive-up window so that that window is on the driver's side. This is the tricky thing about locating a drive-up window, which is why it's always a challenge in getting this to work out in a library. If we did a scheme where the drive-up window was on the north side of the building, like I had shown on the other plan, and we left this drop-off here, it's conceivable that we could reverse the direction of this one-way so that it was one-way westbound instead of one-way eastbound. That would allow for a more natural kind of drop-off to take place at the entry to the building here. And, you know, I didn't mention this. I'm gonna go back to the other plan and mention how we handle drop-off in this other plan. So in this plan, we have identified, you know, a few parking spaces near the front door that could be identified just for drop-off use. So this would allow somebody to pull in for, you know, 10 minutes or something like that. It's kind of a temporary parking space that would allow you to pull in and drop somebody off and get them in the front door. So that's the way that we propose to address the drop-off in this scheme. And it's not an unusual way to address the drop-off issue on a site that has challenges with topography and, you know, lack of space. So I'm sorry, Liz, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay. All right, so as I drop down to the lower floor on this scheme, here you can see the way that stair lands more in the center of the space here, which is kind of nice for this floor plan to come down more in the middle of the floor as opposed to in the corner over here. In this scheme, the elevator is located here, some reconfiguration of the study rooms in order to accommodate that centrally located stair. The other change that happens here is that the staff lounge moves down to, because we no longer have the drive-up window on the lower level here, the staff lounge moves down to this space. And we do keep, in this scheme, we keep the administrative offices and the receiving at the east end of the building.
I have a question.
Sure.
I noticed you use the term staff lounge. Does that include a kitchen? We either have a kitchen or we have a staff lounge. Are one and the same?
Yes, they are.
Okay, thank you.
So in this scheme, there's a pretty dramatic hit on parking in this scheme, as I mentioned. So we're going from 130 spaces that you have right now to 106 in order to accommodate the drive-up drop-off and also the drive-up window on the south side of the building. The other alternate concept that we wanted to discuss tonight is what happens if we leave the meeting room in its current location at the east end of the building. So in this floor plan, and this is one that we had shown a couple of meetings ago, in this floor plan, we moved the administrative offices, the staff lounge, the IT department up to the upper level here. The east end of the building remains the meeting room the way that it is right now. And the reason that we're showing this plan at all, I think there seems to be general consensus that swapping the meeting room with the administrative offices, the way we had shown in the earlier plan, that's a preferred way to go about this. This is a less expensive way to go about it. So that's why we are considering it. So in this plan, again, the lower level is very similar to what we had shown on other schemes. Because we're maintaining the large meeting room at the end of the building here, we have to move tech services around the corner onto the north side of the building with receiving next to it. And this is where we have access to the receiving room in this scheme. In this scheme, again, the parking, the hit-on parking is similar to what I had shown in the previous plan. And then the other plan that we're still carrying is the renovation-only plan, which is shown here, and we've discussed that before. What I'd like to do now is also share with you a computer model that we have been working on that shows how this, gives you a little bit better idea how the building fits into the site. And we're going to show a couple of different massing ideas. And by massing, this is going to have mostly to do with the roof and the character of the roof, which we think really changes the character of the building, depending on how we approach that. So what you're looking at here is an aerial view that's looking down from the southwest corner. So just for orientation, this is Front Street at the top left over here. This is Kingston in the foreground here. Here's the entry off of Kingston. This is that one-way south parking lot. Here's the curved drive that wraps around. Here's our entry canopy that comes out, and then the outdoor plaza space with the terraced landscaping that goes down along the south side here. And everything that you see in yellow is existing. Everything that you see in white is part of the new construction. So as we take a look at, we think that this is kind of a critical view as far as creating an identity for the library. It's what your first impression is as you pull into the lot off of Kingston. So in this massing study, what we're showing is kind of we're using residential forms, pitched roof forms, residential roof forms, as a way of fitting into the residential area. And then doing things like, flipping up the plane, that roof at the entry to create a more kind of welcoming gesture as far as coming into the building here. But one of the things you can start to see even in this iteration is the amount of glass that we can get. And keep in mind, what that's going to feel like when you walk through the front door into this space that has a lot of natural light. I mean, that alone would be such a dramatic difference in terms of the character of the building and the way that people experience it. Here's a view from the south side of the building just to show how that new portion of the building kind of aligns with the existing portion of the building. There's a lot going on in your existing building. There are a lot of different forms, a lot of different couple of different treatments for the roof. And so, trying to do something that has a fairly simple character that doesn't become overly complex and add to the complexity of what you already have on the site. That's something that we're trying to do with both of these schemes. Here's a view as we flip around to this is as if you're looking at it from the northeast corner. So here's this mass here, that's your current meeting room portion of the building. You see a little more yellow on this facade because just wraps around the corner down here. One of the other things you'll notice in these aerial views is a well up on top. That's an accommodation for the mechanical equipment that isn't designed yet, but that we know is coming. And this provides us a way to incorporate it into the architecture and make sure that it's not going to be seen from street level. One of the other things you can start to see in this, the shadows that you see here represent actual sun studies. And so this being the north side of the building, you can see how different this looks just by the virtue of it all being in shade on the north side of the building. One of the other critical views we think is what the view of the building, what's going to be what you're going to see when you come in off of Front Street. And so this is coming in off of that Front Street entrance that's nearest to Kingston. But again, you know, kind of a nice welcoming gesture with the landscape courtyard that leads you up above. Again, the kind of prominent entry feature piece that clearly identifies the building entry as you come into the site. And then finally, kind of a view across that entry, that outdoor entry plaza and outdoor program space, you know, into the building. So you can start to get a sense of what it would feel like to walk into the building. And again, emphasizing the fact that it's kind of airy and, you know, will have a much different character from the existing building. So now I'm going to switch over and show another scheme. Both of these use exactly the same floor plan. This one uses, we refer to it as a flat roof. I just want to be clear that it's not dead flat. There's actually slope to it to make sure that it drains properly and that, you know, it'll function the way that it needs to. But it's really flat in terms of the edges that you get. You don't see any of the pitched roof configuration that you see in the other scheme, which has a much more residential kind of character. And so as we start to look at this scheme, especially I think, you know, when you get down at grade level and start to look at it, it has a very simple geometry, a kind of simple character that we think has a kind of quiet character that we think is appropriate for the library. We also think that it has not so much a residential character as it does more of a civic character. And we think that these two approaches represent two valid but very different ways of going about looking at a scheme like this. In this scheme, we have an overhang here that, because it's on the south side of the building, is actually providing shading so that you can get a lot of glass that looks out on the south side without having to worry about the sunlight coming into the building. Flipping over again to the aerial view from the northeast corner. Here again, you can see the accommodation for a well to conceal mechanical equipment that we know is coming on the building. And then again, this other critical view that you get when you come in off of Front Street. And again, you know, seeing the landscape piece and then the entry piece that clearly calls out the entry to the building. And then finally, a similar view as in the last scheme that kind of shows what you see as you come in. One of the things that you'll notice in this view in particular is that seeing through the glass, this wall here, which we've colored in red, not because we're proposing that it is red, but just to highlight it as a potential feature. This is kind of the back wall of that mechanical well. So when you come in to the entry, there's a small portion of the lobby that's kind of double height there. But this wall, you know, we were talking about a place to put the Lisle Library District logo or something like that. This wall might offer an opportunity for something like that. So that is where we're at with the modeling on this. And you know, just to be clear, we're not proposing to make the whole building white. What's not shown here are materials. We think that you know, that would be the next step. This is kind of the first step for us, is to look at the massing, because I think, as you can see, it gives two very different kinds of character for the building. But as far as materials, you know, we think that the building would look good in brick. If we have a concern about the pitched roof version compared to the flat roof version, in this scheme, you are going to see this has a pitch on it. You know, the pitch that you have on your existing roof is really not adequate to let it kind of drain naturally and use, you know, shingles or other standard kind of roofing material. The roof pitch that we're proposing on this scheme does have that proper kind of pitch. And one of the benefits of that is that it allows us to get a wall that's high enough around the mechanical equipment to really hide it. But the other thing that it means is that this roof surface is going to become kind of a dominant element in terms of the character of the building. And so, you know, that if that's asphalt shingles, it's going to have one kind of character. If it's a standing seam metal roof, that's going to have a very different kind of character, but it's also going to be more costly. So, you know, we think that, you know, decisions like this about, you know, what's the proper way to approach this in terms of the massing, the roof forms on the building. This is a fairly subjective decision to be made, but hopefully you can see that it has a big effect in terms of kind of the character that you get to the building. And there's something kind of quiet and simple about the geometry of what you see on the screen right now that really appeals to us, especially compared to the variety of everything that you have on the other building. Getting something that has a kind of strong, simple character, we think, is a nice complement to what you have out there right now. So that is our presentation. I'm happy to go back and refer to the floor plans, or, you know, this model allows us, we can kind of flip around and look at, you know, all different kinds of views if there's something that you're interested in that I haven't shown here tonight.
All right, Secretary Swistek, I see your hand first. I'll let you go first.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Don. Since we're on this picture right here, I'm going to ask the question about this first.
Sure.
So I see the kind of stairs up from the north parking lot. We had talked before about there being like sidewalk to come up along the side of the drive too, if someone had like a stroller or something and they
Yep.
parked in the north parking lot. That would, I don't see it on here, but that's something that still be considered.
Absolutely. It's a good point. We showed a little bit of the sidewalk that we know is going to be in place, but not all of it. And so you're
Okay.
exactly right. There will be a sidewalk that wraps around this edge coming down to the lower level. You may also have noticed we didn't show the sidewalk, you know, the sidewalk that would happen at the bottom of these stairs. So we will make sure we get all that in for the next time.
Okay, thank you. So that was just because you're on this one. If you could go back to the very first one you showed us. So just the west entry concept upper floor. So that's just the very first page, your page 2.
The floor plan?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Yeah, the upper floor.
Yep. Got it.
Okay. So I just kind of have a general question for you, but also staff and the board. You mentioned the team collection that's right there. And since our last meeting, I've been thinking about it a lot more. We had talked before about like a dedicated teen space. So a spot where teens would be able to kind of come and hang out. And I don't know how that would be reflected in just teen collection being there. And I don't know if we did anything for that or not. I just don't know. Like I don't.
That's a good
I don't
question.
envision this right here. To me, this where it says teen collection, I'm just thinking, oh, that's just where their materials will be, but not a place where they could go and hang.
So Tatiana, you want me to take a shot at that first, or do you want to jump in?
Well, what I'll say is when I've met with the group before, it was one of the same comments I had too, Emily. And this is by no means like the end design. And so I envision more can be done with the teen collection space as we see it here, and possibly adjusting some of the office spaces. And so I'll leave, I'll let Don continue.
So, you know, again, I feel like we have to do this every meeting. We have to remind ourselves as we work through this as well. This is conceptual design. And we have a lot of development in terms of the design to get through on this yet. That being said, I think in particular, this question about a dedicated teen room is a particularly important question. And so as we've been developing the plans, even at this conceptual level, we've been looking for ways that we might be able to accommodate that. We're trying to be very pragmatic and responsible right now by limiting the size of the building. So obviously one way to accommodate the dedicated teen space is to simply add on to the building, make the building larger, which is going to cost more money. The approach that we prefer to take, and this is what Tatiana was alluding to, is you can see the YS office space right now. Well, we're showing some workstations in there, but frankly, we haven't developed this sufficiently enough to know whether we've got some space that we could take out of that for some other purpose. And I think, you know, the YS office space is one example of that kind of thing. So I think as we move this forward, we are going to continue to look for opportunities to accommodate a dedicated teen collection. We're going to try to do that within the existing building footprint. If that doesn't work for some reason, we will come up with some strategies to share with you to consider for making the building slightly larger. You know, for example, you know, there you can see these dark bands here that represent existing bays on the building right now. You know, one thought that we had is it makes sense to bump one of these out in order to gain a little bit more floor plate in order to accommodate a dedicated teen space. So I think we didn't want to take that step yet because, like I said, we first want to see if there's a way to arrange some of these office spaces and some of these other areas, work through that in a little more detail, make sure that they're as efficient as we can get them, and see if there's a way to accommodate that within the existing footprint. But it's a very good, I think it's a very important issue to keep track of as we go forward.
And one more thing on that topic. I know that spoke with Don about not necessarily having a square box for the teen space, but possibly having a corner or an alcove, I think, Don, you mentioned,
right.
Where it could fit into the area of the youth services overall space, but also have kind of sectioned off area for those older teens.
Thank you. I've just been thinking about it as my kids keep getting older and I want them to still have a place where they can go and enjoy spending time at the library. So it's kind of in the forefront of my mind. So I think I appreciate that. And then the other thing I just wanted to say at this point too is I like the idea of kind of having that new wall to block off the public space from the administrative aspect of it on the side. I like that, and I like that, you know, there would be potentially another elevator for public usage that's you know, near the lobby, and that other elevator that we have would really function as a movement, you know, for staff and getting up and down and all of that. And I like that. I like that it's kind of separated into these two different distinct parts, the public area and then the administrative area, the staff area. So thank you. I don't have any other questions right now. Just thank you for all the work that you've put in, and I'll probably have more questions after everyone else talks. Thanks.
Any other trustees? Vice President Bartelli, I see your light going off, but do you no or yes?
Well, a lot to absorb.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm really liking, I'm liking the west entry concept though, I will say. Need a little time, I think.
Sure. No, and I think, you know, in that, if I could just comment on that really quickly, yeah, we're at that point in the process where it seems like every time we meet with you, we're presenting a lot of new material. And it is a lot to absorb. And we understand that you need some time. You have to live with this a little bit to kind of, you know, understand it fully and kind of understand how you feel about it. That will get easier as we go forward because, you know, we're at the point where we're talking about kind of big initial ideas, and that's the most challenging part. It will get easier as we move forward in the process.
Tom?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. I know there's probably no way to do this, but when we talk about another elevator, we talk about, you know, making the footprint larger. Can you give us an idea of where that cost might fit into the scenarios that PMA presented to us? Are we looking at, I don't have it in front of me right now, I should, the 8.5 figure, the 9.7 or the 11? I know.
Yeah, we don't have an answer for that. We should have an answer for that at the next meeting.
Okay.
But you know, regarding what's the premium paid to increase the building footprint to accommodate some kind of teen area, that's something that we can identify as we move forward.
Graham, I saw your hand going up. Or,
Yeah,
sorry, go ahead. Vice President Bartelli, were you done? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Vice President Bartelli, were you done?
No, that's fine.
Okay, Graham, go ahead.
Having worked with Don and Eric in the past, I know that what they concentrate on is not just what you like, but they also want to know what is it that you don't like. And that provides valuable input as well. So if anybody's got any strong feelings about something on this layout or the way it works or anything like that, I think Don would appreciate knowing, so that, you know, he can develop things accordingly as well.
Well, I could pick up from there then, because I'll start with that then. Actually, I'm glad this presentation, because actually I did like the concept at first, but I'm glad with the presentation, because it actually opened my eyes to a couple of things I didn't realize when I was going through this. The elevator currently, as we all know, is on the opposite end of the building. So I know a second elevator is going to be very costly, because we know what it costs just to replace the one we did a year or so ago. But I mean, I guess I see if we're going to do the west entrance, we probably do need to have a second elevator, because I just can't see having somebody with, let's say, a wheelchair or somebody with a stroller having to go all the way across the building to the existing elevator. And if that's not even bad enough, they might have to, depending where they're going, they might have to come back across the building to their destination. Now, that being said, I did not realize until the presentation that the existing elevator is just cut off and it'd be just used for staff. I have a tough time digesting that. That is, to me, would be a very underutilized elevator. I would like to at least keep that open to the public. So actually, probably, I think it was your second alternate concept still had that open to the public. I mean, not to say you have to duplicate the second alternate concept, but I definitely would like to see that elevator kept open to the public. And then, I mean, I never thought about a second elevator, but if we're going to do the west entrance, it's almost a necessity. I think I just can't see how to.
But yes, the second elevator is open to the public.
The second elevator is, but I just don't know if I like closing off the original elevator. That seems very underutilized to me. I just don't know if I like that at all. And
Yeah, but I don't think it's closed off.
pardon?
I'm not sure. Can you clarify, Don, is that wall, you know, keeping everybody but staff out? Or, I mean, I envision that wall as just a more aesthetic and you know, like trustees coming to the administrative offices would be able to walk through and use the elevator and get through that area, correct?
Yes. So, you know, we can handle this in a couple of different ways. One option is to not put the wall in. Another option is to put the wall in and leave this accessible to the public back here. And we identify that through signage here. You know, it identifies that these are where the administrative offices are. It could also identify that there's a second public elevator back here as well. So I think we saw this as a way of kind of aesthetically cleaning up this piece back here, especially given the fact that we're moving the administrative offices to the east end of the building in this scheme. But I think that you're bringing up a very good point. I suspect that the nature of this separation and you know how that works will be, we'll go through several iterations of that before we get it exactly right.
And then another thing is, so if I'm looking at this correctly on the lower floor, so basically the restrooms are going to be turned into like a copy room and an administrative conference room. Am I looking at that right?
Yes,
And then you're just going to build 2 new restrooms?
correct.
I mean, obviously I like the design, but I guess the concern I'm going to have with that is I could see that being costly to do both of those projects. And I mean, trying to be efficient with the money and getting more bang for our buck for something that actually brings, you know, something to the library, just moving restrooms around like that, I don't know. The other thing is, and I know we discussed this a little bit last month, and I mean, it's a fair conversation to have. I know it looks like the meeting rooms are getting moved from where they are now to the large meeting rooms. I mean, I'm open to that still, but again, I don't know if that's going to be worth the cost at the end of the day. I mean, I'm open to it. I'm not closing the door on it by any stretch of the imagination. I just don't know if that's going to be worth the cost. The other thing, as far as like even losing like maybe some parking spots, regardless of what we do, that's not such a big thing to me because I'm most, the exception of maybe some special events, that's not a problem. The other thing is with special events, I think we could I mean, staff could probably chime in on this too. I think we could probably that road, if you will, or that little the road between the 2 parking lots, the north and the south parking lot there on the west end of the building. I mean, we could always close that off for special events and basically open up that whole front of the property when we have these special events. I'm also not 100% sure. I know you still have that road, if you will, as a 2-way. I mean, that's something we could discuss down the road in more detail. I still probably am a little bit more inclined to have that be 1-way personally, just for a safety issue, like from the north parking lot coming to the south. But I mean, we don't have to go into that in detail probably right now. That's something is probably pretty flexible. Excuse me, and on a much smaller scale, even that tree right where I know this is something very small, but that tree kind of where the drop off area is, I don't know if I like, even though I think it would be nice to have one there, just from a safety perspective, I don't know if I would like that there, because if somebody's going to be backing out of those drop off areas, they probably want a clear visual of anybody coming off of Kingston or down that road from the north parking lot to the south parking lot. So just for sight lines, even though the tree would look nice there, I just don't know that, probably just from a safety issue, I don't know if I would like that tree there. Going back to the, I'll say this, going back to the youth service comment, I know it probably isn't that much square footage, but I don't know if we need all that space for a vending area. That's just me personally. So I think that's all I had as far as the west entry concept. I don't know if we want to go one by one like that, or just talk about the whole thing. But pretty much the west entry concept, those are my concerns on that. Director Wine, oh, there you are. Director Weinstein, do you want to chime in with anything?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Any trustees who want to jump in? I'll go last.
Okay. Any other trustees want to comment? Trustee Sullivan. And then Duffy will be next. Trustee Sullivan, I think you're on mute again.
Okay, sorry. Ron, do you mind going back to the models or I forgot what you called them, the concept?
You see it?
Yes.
Okay.
I like this model much better than I think what you called the Civic model.
Okay.
I like this one. I think it's really fits in with, we are located in a residential area. We're not located in a civic plaza. I can see where, the two are different, and I can see where, if we were in a civic plaza and if all the buildings kind of reflected that, I could see where the other one would be more attractive, at least to me. I do have a question about how, this roof on the north, let's see, west corner, that roof line looks really weird to me. That's it, yeah. It doesn't go down to the side of the building, does it?
No, and this could be an internal gutter that we build around here. One of the challenges always with a pitched roof scheme is that you have gutters on the side of the building, which means then you have downspouts that come down on the outside of the building. So this particular idea is exploring an idea where maybe we have a built-in gutter around a portion of this. But I think, again, we'll refine this roof form as we develop this scheme. It might be that these kind of chamfered corners that are shown here don't make as much sense with a scheme like this if we just want to put a simple hip roof around the corner of it. So I think that's something that we would take a look at as we develop this.
Okay, I really love this model. There is something weird about that side for me.
Okay.
And I like the west concept. And that's it.
Okay, great.
Any other, Trustee Duffy, I think you were next.
Yeah. So I'll start with what I dislike, which is comparative to the other, and Don, if you can go to like the layouts, not the drawings, please. I disliked how in the other ones outside of the initial concept that you presented with the drop off, to me, it just was very weird traffic flow. And I could just see that as you're entering into here, you got people taking lefts, it was a little overcomplicated for me. And so I liked how, and honestly what I liked about it was I liked how you addressed the drive-through on the other side. Because I do believe that this drive-through for especially some of the more elderly patrons is a very nice service that we're building into the renovation. I agree with President Hummel. I know him and I are agreeing all night tonight. So, the one thing because I also want to make sure that as much money is squeezed into the actual space and services for the library. This elevator thing, for some reason, is still sticking to me. And I honestly, if I had a solution for you, I would give it to you. Because I agree on the principle of you don't want to make someone that needs to use an elevator to walk very far. But on the flip side, I don't want to have two elevators in a 30,000-ish square foot location that just adds additional maintenance and costs over time for us. And the amount of staff that would probably use the elevator to, let's say theoretically, and I know it would also be used by the public, but we're going to assume for an argument's sake this is predominantly a staff elevator or for some way, is really small. So I don't have a solution. I think that's the problem I have. I think I agree with President Hummel that you're going to have to move the elevator. Or is there a way? I don't know. Like because I like the West Country concept and everything. I like everything else. That's the one area that I keep getting hung up on.
So
You know, most elevator consultants would recommend that you have 2 elevators because when one is down, you have a backup. And quite often when we hire an elevator consultant, they recommend 2 on a project, and then they say, well, if you could position them so one was mostly dedicated to staff, but could be used by the public when necessary if the other elevator had an issue, is kind of their ideal approach to it. It's not getting around that there is cost involved in having a second elevator.
Can I just add something real quick to that too? I think we're forgetting about the fact that circulation is on one floor and then there's also collection on both floors, and staff will need to move materials up and down, and they'll need the elevator for that. And so I think that's something that we're forgetting. It's not just for people to walk in and go up and down. It's also for moving material and the collections. That's it.
Can I just ask a follow-up question to the elevator question and maybe make a comment on it? Because this is a kind of fundamentally critical decision in terms of the design. And, you know, I think, you know, Trustees Duffy's recognition that it's hard to find a solution that both preserves the west entry and allows you to work with just the existing elevator that you have in place. That recognizes a kind of fundamental conflict that's built into the plan. So what's a way of addressing that? Well, I think your other option is to move away from the west entry and move the entry down nearer to the existing elevator that you have. So if what's going to drive this is the cost of an additional elevator, then that's where the plan ends up. And then I guess the follow-up question to that is that trade-off worthwhile? So, you know, we appreciate, you know, we're trying to take a very pragmatic approach to this wherever we can. There are going to be, you know, kind of conflicts built in. Everything's not going to work out perfectly. You know, we're not building a new building on a vacant site and, you know, with all the flexibility that comes with that to get things exactly where we want them. So I think we appreciate the comments that have been made regarding the elevator. We agree with it. We think that there's a way to, you know, identify the cost for a second elevator as a secondary option. But I think you've rightfully recognized that it's really kind of necessary in this scheme to put it in. But I think the thing that's hard for us to, you know, propose an alternate solution to you that addresses that specific issue is that the alternate solution is going to take away from some of the best features of the plan the way it is right now. So I think, you know, along the way, these are all kind of value judgments that have to be made, and they're your value judgments to make. I think you know, we can present ideas and kind of, you know, help you with identifying the pros and cons of it, but there are going to be some kind of fundamental, you know, challenges like this where we have to make a decision one way or the other.
If I may ask and thank you for walking me through that. If I may ask a companion.
In 15 minutes. If you wish to apply or renew a library card, please do so now.
That library card taken care of.
At least it's not 15 seconds.
Yeah. So, the other question has been, okay, so let's say, I agree with you, Don. I love the West Side entrance concept. And it is, then let's talk mechanicals. And I forgot where current existing mechanicals are versus this. Can you walk me through, like, where are the mechanicals? Are you moving any mechanicals?
Yes.
Yes.
Is most of it staying, or like what is being moved and what is staying?
There are mechanicals on the east end of the building that are being removed. I'm sorry, that are remaining on the east end. And that serves pretty much all the existing building that is going to remain as is, roughly in its shape. There are mechanicals on the west end that are coming out that would be replaced by new mechanicals located up in that roof well that Don has been pointing out in the massing models. So it won't take up footprint area or site area anymore. It'll be up buried within the roof structure.
Okay. So we're not moving all the mechanicals. We're moving some, and we're not taking up space here. Basically, by plopping them on the roof, we're getting space back from the existing mechanicals that were, in essence, are dead space right now in our building.
Yeah, it's roughly half the mechanicals.
Okay.
So I'll just jump in really quick again, because actually I'm kind of glad, Don, you brought that up, because actually I was going to kind of ask is if there was going to be like a southeast concept, but I guess I could probably already imagine the trade-off to that would be moving mechanicals would probably almost, I don't know, would probably be costly in its own right too. So I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm glad you at least brought up there is an opportunity for a southeast entrance. I don't know how that would look though, because that would be kind of awkward, although it would actually open up a lot of parking because we have our parking kind of weighted that way actually. So I just don't know. If Director Weinstein, you want to jump in on anything on this?
Sure. I too find the west entry the most appealing, and I do like the solution that the architects came up with for the drop off. I didn't like the loop. I think Trustee Sullivan mentioned the kind of the awkward turn, and I don't think that's necessary for the amount of traffic we have. And I do like that drop off area. And I actually agree with President Hummel about the tree to the left of that drop off area. I'm not sure that necessarily belongs there. And to the topic of the meeting rooms, I do think the meeting rooms belong in more of the center of the library. So there's faster access for those who come in on the west end side to attend a program. So I think that's prime real estate. And to put the administrative offices in the center of the library, I think is a waste of prime real estate. So putting the admin over to the east side where there's easy access for a receiving area as well, I think is the most efficient use of that space. And I do know that moving the restrooms and such, there's a cost involved. But again, I just want to remind everybody that this is for the long term. We want to make the right decisions, and these will be lasting for 20, 50 years. I like the outdoor program space. I think that solves a lot for us in terms of the parking issue that we have. And when we were talking about the 14 spaces in the lots, we use more than 14 spaces for our outdoor parking. We probably use 10 more than 14, like maybe 25 spaces back in that southeast lot when we do the outdoor programming. So having built-in outdoor programming space is excellent. And as far as the kind of the 3D models, I actually like the flat roof model better. But I know we're in residential, and it does look a little too severe right now in the model you're showing. But I do like the continuity of the flat roof, and when you look at the profile of our building, I think it kind of brings about, and it's not really close, but it's kind of like a Frank Lloyd Wright-y, more prairie-looking profile than having kind of the upright, the pitched roofs. And so when I say this looks a little too modern, and I think maybe Trustee Sullivan said it's like a little too civic, a little too severe, I think we can solve that with what materials we use and maybe some cutouts, some texture. I'm not sure, but I do like the profile of the flat roof better than the pitched roof. And that's just obviously aesthetic. And I think that's it. I do like the west concept much. Number one.
You know, just an editorial comment, that tree that we're picking on in the floor plans, it also doesn't look very good in the model here, so.
It's in a different spot on the model.
Yeah.
It moves around.
Slightly.
Can you comment on the kind of the modern, it does look a little bit modern here. Is there more we can do to kind of not soften, because I do like the kind of simplicity, but is there something in terms of the materials used that we can make it look a little bit more of the prairie kind of look?
Yeah, Tatiana, I think you bring up a very good point with respect to the materials. And you know, one of the ways that we're going to look to integrate, you know, we also don't want this to look like a foreign object attached to your existing library building. And so one of the ways that we are going to try to provide some unity between those two is to look at some materials that we could put on the new portion of the building that would relate to the existing building. Now, this doesn't mean using the same stone that you have, but it could definitely mean using brick that has a, you know, it's not maybe a monolithic colored brick. It's maybe a brick that has some range in terms of the colors in it that, you know, imitates the stone that you have on the building without looking like the stone. And, you know, one of the challenges of presenting a flat roof massing in a model like this that looks all white is that it has a very modern character, partially by virtue of it being rendered in white. You know, I would like to at least take the next step of showing what this would look like if it were rendered in brick, you know, and see how that could change the character of it. So yes, I understand, you know, we intentionally, again, it's a concept model. We intentionally left it kind of uncomplicated and simple in order to focus on kind of the big massing ideas. But I think you're right to recognize that the material treatment on this scheme in particular will have a rather dramatic effect on the character of of the building.
What's scaring me about what you're saying is you're talking about brick plus the stone. So are we talking about this side of the building being one material and the other side being cedar and stone?
Potentially, I think it's possible that could happen. You know, we'll look at some other options. We mentioned in a previous discussion the possibility of a rain screen system, and you know, I know that's probably a foreign term to many, but that's something that we can explain the way that works. So I think, you know, the next step in this, I actually consider this kind of a positive development in the conversation, because I think what we're talking about now is the next step in this. And the next step in the development is to show what this would look like rendered in materials, and not just the addition, but showing how it relates to what you have on the existing building. Now, again, you know, I want to emphasize that this is conceptual design, and that, you know, these are the kind of things that really get worked out in detail, you know, as you move forward with the scheme. But I think it's an important enough issue that we need to take a look at it, at least at a kind of preliminary level, to give you a better sense of how that could change the character of what you're looking at. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and are there any pros and cons to the roofs we're talking about? Because I know we're not making a decision about which roof, but because they're so different in terms of having a pitch versus a flat.
You know, one issue is going to be you have to frame those pitched roofs, and that's going to be an added expense in putting up that roof. The cost of the roofing is going to be relatively comparable over time. They both last about 25, 30 years these days if you put in a high quality one. You can quite often you can get a little bit more time out of a low slope ply roof just by maintaining it a little longer, but you can't really stretch the life of shingle roofs very well. It might be a 5-year longer roof, but the biggest difference will be the cost of building out those frame pitches.
So are you thinking that the building that we're looking at right now is concrete?
No, brick.
No, a soft brick.
Yeah.
How do you describe? Some brick is really hard engineered looking brick. We're talking something more residential tone, right, Don?
Yes.
Characterizing it.
And I think, you know, we're kind of one step beyond what we're ready for in terms of this discussion. I think we have some ideas about it, but I think it'll be much easier to explain these ideas by being able to show you actual examples of what it is that we're talking about.
And what reassurance do we have about flat roofs and 2 feet and 3 feet of snow? And the weight and, you know, the propensity
Oh,
in some.
the modern code requires you build roofs that can withstand drifted snow. That is part of whether it's a pitched roof or a flat roof. Both will be required to do that. A pitched roof, the problem is you'll get all the load on one side. You get an asymmetrical when the wind blows from a particular direction. You get a much heavier load on one side versus the other. So you have to reinforce it for either side to do that. The old roofs didn't have to account for drifted snow, and they also weren't as insulated as well, so snow melted off more quickly and you didn't have as much load on them. This roof will be much stronger than the existing roofs engineering.
Okay.
The photographs you've seen recently of collapsed roofs are not an indicator of what to expect on your project at all.
Those are old roofs in Chicago. They put those bowstring buildings in.
Yep.
They had no insulation in them and they had black tar roofing. And so when it snowed, the heat from inside or the sun from the outside just melted it off. Since then, you've gone back and insulated them and put white roofs on them and nothing melts. So they carry a huge snow load now. There's companies that just reinforce those types of buildings.
Any other trustees with any comments in general or specifically to the roof? Treasurer Norton.
Not specific to the topic just covered. If anybody else wants to jump in while we're still there. No.
You're good. You're good. You're good. You could go.
Okay. All right. I'll just very quickly say a couple of positive things just so that even though I know we're trying to focus on the critical points, you know, Don and Eric know that, you know, this wasn't, you know, a totally, you know, bad impression from me. West entrance still real strong preference, I think, for everyone, including myself. And, you know, appreciate the 3D rendered drawings. That's helpful. And appreciate how much of what feedback we gave last time was incorporated in this next round. And what's been said about the elevator, I don't think anybody needs to add, I think, but, you know, I echo those concerns as well. But for me, the thing that's really still my two things, I think it's safety overall and the universal design concept that we want to make sure that, and I think the elevator issue is what trustees have said so far about the elevators is that's at the core of it, is we want to make it a very accessible space. And so what I'm concerned about is if the entrance is on the west side and thinking about where most of the parking is, there's no parking on the west side, right? So you already are going to have more of a walk than where we are currently, where it's an east side entrance with east side parking and parking directly nearby on the south side. What we're talking about here, so that is like, that's the big to me to do is So you're going to park somewhere and you're automatically going to be walking farther than you do currently just to get to the entrance. And then again, going back to what I mentioned last time about the concern that the Friends of the Library brought, was that they care very much about how the meeting rooms were right there at the entrance. So again, like if we did like a pedometer right now on what it takes to get to the meeting rooms from the entrance from the parking, and then we compare that to what it would be in the future with this rendering, I think we're going to more than triple the number of steps required to get to the meeting rooms for people from where they're going to be likely to park for meetings to the entrance and then all the way to the other side of the library for meetings. So that to me is the big, problem to solve with this current iteration, is how do we not make that a real drawback to the point where it basically, prevents people from wanting to come. Or just another facet to that, since we are leaving the east side entrance as, I asked that question last time, we're leaving that east side entrance as an emergency exit, if it would be under consideration to just during meetings, just specific, programs, perhaps, the adult programs that currently are using the meeting space, that during those hours only, the other entrance exit would be in use for the public, to alleviate that, because otherwise what I see there is, again, like I said, the major deterrent to people being able to get to the areas that they need to get to. We're worried about people getting to the elevators. I'm worried about them even just getting in the front door. And then related to that, I just want to say, I'm going to echo the word scary. What scared me about the alternate concept was sort of the driving confusions. If we look at alt, I'm trying to get to, I think it's definitely on alt 2, where it's like that the drop off has, Liz mentioned it, that the drop off has you go in a counterclockwise fashion from the one way heading east to now going up and basically north and then back to the west. That would then require people that are parked on the south side, which is close parking, so prime parking from the west entrance, they're going to be facing a crosswalk that has potentially traffic going in 2 directions. That's my safety concern. So that scares me right there. So I would say this version of things is a hard no for me because of the safety issue of that. But I also do feel what Tom felt about the tree, and the sight lines in the first west concept. If that's the A plan, if that's the best that we've got right now, and your drop off is, in the best place that the drop off can be at that point, that person, that is parking there for drop off still has to go in reverse in the direction of the one-way flow of traffic going east in order to be able to, and that's where pedestrians may be from the parking side, and that's where other cars inbound may be coming, and maybe that is the best we can do, but I'm challenging that. What else could we do? I do, however, like that the drive-up window in this iteration is in a segregated section, so you just kind of flow your way on east and then north and then over to the drive-up window, which again is on the driver's side. So all of that makes sense, and that's very helpful. I also appreciate that the parking on the east side then makes for a good connection to the staff. So I feel like that would be primary staffing parking and would be utilized well there, because that's kind of their entrance, that whole area, that whole zone kind of for them, so that they're not competing with parking spaces closer to the main entrance. So that part of it makes sense to me, but parking for patrons remains a primary concern for me of this west entrance, because your 2 main areas are the now further limited spaces on the south side, because we talked about we were going to lose some spaces, I think, on the north portion of the south side, due to what else needed to be there. But then the north side parking would be maybe next best, closest to the entrance, but you've got the grading. People have got to either go upstairs or kind of the long way up a sidewalk to get to the main entrance. So I don't want us to, I'll get a pedometer and practice it myself and come back to the next meeting if people, want to know how big a difference it is. But I think it's a tremendous difference to the number of steps we'd be asking the average patron to take to be able to get to the services.
All right, thank you. Any other trustees with comments or questions?
I have a question.
Oh, trustee Larson, and I'll go back to you, trustee Duffy.
How many spots currently do we have on the side, I'm sorry, I'm instructionally challenged right now, on the south side of the building?
The question is, how many parking spots do we have on the south side of the building?
54,
How many?
54, right?
Yes, it's shown on the diagram that should be on the screen right now.
Yeah.
So the 35 on the west entry concept? No, 54.
It's currently 54, but it would be, oh, where's it at?
35.
Okay. Okay. I like the west entry concept. I like where the drive window is down on the bottom. The elevator, we definitely do need two of them. You know, I can understand why you need two of them. You know, it's kind of all I have to say right now.
Thank you. Trustee Duffy, I think you had your hand up as well.
Yeah, I know, Sullivan, you also raised your hand. I think, do you want to go before? Be fine. Okay. Yeah. So I don't even know, I want to preface this with, I don't even know what I'm about to say, if I even agree with what I'm about to say or even think we should do it. But the other issue I have with as I've kind of thought about this, is when you look at the parking, you know, for the first west side entrance concept, you have 5 accessible parking spots that are handicapped. But the issue with the west side entrance is that we have now moved the entrance the furthest point in our building from where all of our existing parking lots are, our parking spaces are. So so it's not just the handicapped, but it's also older patrons that maybe just, you know, you get that pedometer out, Trustee Norton. But like, it's one of the issues I see here is like we've actually shifted the entrance as far away from the parking. And I guess, now I love the west entrance concept for I'm going to call it the wow factor, like the first impression. But I also would surmise that you could create a first great impression without having the entrance there. Could theoretically a nice entrance be made where our current entrance is, that still, because the issue is, then that at least adheres to our parking that we have already in existence. But then also, you know, and I'm going to mention the elevator, but I do see, to Don's point and Derek's point, on the 2 elevators, but the elevators there, we're adhering at least to the meeting rooms. To Treasurer Norton's point, I agree, but mostly to me, I'm more worried about patrons that have to walk far, that maybe are limited in the mobility. And I don't want them to have to park. If you parked, and like you're looking at this right now, imagine if you were in the 35 space parking lot and you were at the end of that. That's a pretty far walk if you have mobility issues. And if we only had 5 or 6 or 7 just handicapped, you know, that is something to be aware of, I think, as we kind of thought this through a little bit. I mean, I guess the question is the west side entrance great because it makes the most sense for the building layout, or can the building layout kind of be flipped in what we produced, but still have a nice first impression as people come in? And then we address the whole parking issue with, like, people don't have to walk as far, and we're using majority of our spaces of the 48. I mean, something I think about. I don't know how I feel about it. 9/11 on a Wednesday night.
Yeah.
So I think it's something to just ponder, but I wanted to bring that up.
So, so let me just jump in really quick. That was going to be one of the questions I was going to ask here at the end, is if we want to look at maybe a southeast concept. But Director Weinstein, was that you?
Yeah, I just want
Okay.
to say, I mean, this is such a puzzle, and it really is. And to try to solve all of this current building's, what I'll call deficiencies, is very difficult, as we are seeing. And so I don't want to not remember the entrance. We also want a physical, a staff presence at the entrance. We want there to be, and not only for like greeter, but also for security. And right now, having the entrance on the east side, yes, we have a greeter there who is prepared to offer masks and gloves and things like that. But we don't have, I mean, outside of COVID, we don't have a staff presence at our entrance. And though the first concept we looked at had the meeting rooms more towards the center of the library than on the east side, walking from the front doors to that meeting room is a little longer than you would now when you first walk in our building, but it's not the full length of the building at all. So I think that's a reasonable compromise. The parking, you know, I think there's work to be done on the handicap spots and the drop-off spots. Do we really need 3 spots for the drop-off? Do we need that kind of tree area? Can we recover some more parking spots there? Not sure, but I do think it makes a lot of sense to have the west end where it is. I don't know how we can accomplish everything by moving our entry back to the east side. I just don't know.
And I'll just jump in too. Even though I mean, I agree with like Trustee Duffy with the parking. The one trade-off with the west, or even though I mean, it's definitely, I think there's more parking if we had like an east or southeast entrance. We are gonna, the 23 spots on the north will then become accessible though to the public. So we are going to essentially gain those 23 spots. Because I would imagine that wouldn't be staff parking anymore. If anything, the staff would probably be closer to the 14 parking spaces on the bottom, on the far south of our lot or of our property. So we do gain the 23 on the north. The only thing is it probably it'd still not be really for the mobility, mobile challenge people, until we get the sidewalk. But even, and actually that's a question for Don, is there is definitely a grade or an incline from the north parking lot to get to the front door, because obviously there's stairs along the building, right? So even if you're coming on around that road on the sidewalk, there would still be an incline, correct?
Yes, this would be an incline, but it meets accessibility requirements.
Okay.
So this is considered by ADA guidelines to be an accessible route.
Okay. Now, actually, let me ask a question here. And actually, I just dawned on me as we're looking at this as I was. So I know we have this two-way, this loop, we'll call it. And like I said, I'm personally not crazy about it being 2 ways. But is there enough space to have that loop, but also have like parking spots there, or how is that too tight?
It would be tight to try to get perpendicular parking like you see in these other lots here.
Okay.
If this were one way, it's certainly conceivable that you could get parallel parking along one side of it.
Okay. Yeah. The only, I mean, it could create some parking spaces. I think the concern I would have with the parallel parking is I could see if somebody's, going to back in and park, then you could start a little bit of a traffic jam there too, like people trying to go around the loop, but then they got to wait, like how you would do in the city or whatever. Not that it's that volume, of course, but
Yep.
and it might be a minor issue, but I don't know. But well, first, is any other trustee got any questions or comments? And I got two more questions for everybody. Treasurer Norton, and then
I
Graham
just
will
want
go.
I just want to throw out a pretty wild idea. I don't know because it's late enough or whatever. But with parking being something that we're talking about now as a potential concern with the west side entrance, I just want to remind that we do have property to the south, and that we don't yet have that in this, and we did, and I think rightfully not consider it in the initial design. But if we are becoming married to the west entrance and parking, and accessibility remain a concern, I want to reopen that concept that we might be able to utilize the south side undeveloped area as additional parking that would be nearer to the entrance.
My concern with that personally would be, I'm trying to work within the current parking lot, as in my opinion, as much as possible. I don't want to then just shift the cost of building a parking lot on the south lot, because that's not my goal either. So that's just my personal opinion. Graham, I think you had your hand, or Jenny, I'm sorry, are you done? Or?
Well, I just wanted to rebut, and well, not really, but just say, like, that's why I prefaced it with a wild idea. But this is me basically saying I'm not an architect. I'm hoping an architect has a better solution. Throwing it out there in case you don't.
Okay. Graham, did you want to go?
Yes, please. I'm not an architect either, and I'm just kind of brainstorming, Don, so forgive me. But I'm hearing there's seems to be too long a walk to the meeting room. So I'm wondering if the covered way that you have at the entry there doesn't become a part of the building, and you don't have your 2-story high entrance, but actually make it a building there, and make that move the entry over to the west side and make it a face of the building, and basically put your meeting room in that space there. And I apologize, I'm just brainstorming. Don't hit me.
Can I respond to some of the things that we've heard here tonight?
Sure.
It's been very good discussion. I think we always appreciate the feedback that we get, and don't be worried that the comments sound critical to us. This is part of the process. We're used to going through this, and it's very helpful to hear what you have to say. I think that one of the hardest things with doing a project like this is that oftentimes judgments are made based on existing conditions and what you have right now. And I'm gonna discuss two issues that have come up repeatedly tonight because they are kind of fundamental issues to the design. One has to do with parking, the other has to do with meeting room location and its proximity to the entry. So it's kind of the parking, the entry location, the meeting room. These three things seem to be really interconnected in a lot of the discussion that we've had here tonight. So one of the things that we've designed a number of public libraries. I cannot think of a public library we have designed where the meeting room is as close to the front door as your existing configuration is out there. And I would say that the reason that we feel comfortable with the west entry scheme and where the meeting room is being proposed relative to the front door is because when you come in the front door, you feel like you're part of the lobby space. And this really feels like the meeting room is kind of directly off of the lobby space. So we have done meeting rooms that are on different floors from the entry into the building. So there are a number of ways of addressing this issue. And I think because you have a kind of extreme convenience built into your existing building right now, we're sensitive to the fact that There is some point where you move the meeting room and it's too far from the entry. And I think that's why we all preferred moving the meeting room to the location that we're showing it here, because our sense was that to leave it where it's at right now with the entry at the west end, that was too far. That did feel like you were having to walk through the entire library building to access the meeting room. We were comfortable with the way this is proposed here right now because it does feel like it's kind of off of the lobby space. So I would just encourage you to think about this with kind of an open mind, not just compared to what you have right now. I think there have been a number of comments about picking up additional parking near the entry. That makes a lot of sense. I think getting rid of this tree, that's a certainty at this point. Picking up some additional parking, taking a closer look at what do we need for a kind of dedicated drop-off area. We're also showing all of our handicap parking spaces in this south lot as near the front door as possible, which when you talk about universal design, that is the right way to do it. If we look at your existing building plan, right now you have handicap spots that are kind of scattered all over. If you took the handicap spots that are located on the north side right now and move them over here, I would be curious to do a kind of parking count about from, how far from your front door right now do you have a certain number of parking spaces compared to what we're proposing in the other scheme. And I think if it were looked at that way, and especially if you consider the 23 parking spaces on the north side of the building now being something that, are feasible to think that the public would actually use those to come into the library building. I'm not sure we've made the parking any worse than your existing condition there. I think we've actually improved it. So, that's probably worth a little bit of effort on our part just to kind of do a study and maybe share that with you. It might be something you want to take a look at it and consider as well. I think as far as relocating the building entry, we did look at a scheme where we had the entry off of the south side of the building to get it nearer the center of the building, nearer the existing elevator, nearer the meeting room. And it's something that can be made to work okay, but you may recall that the grade change we have from the parking lot to here required that we have a ramp that kind of goes back and forth in front of the building to make it accessible. It's not, again, in terms of universal accessibility, it would not be considered as universally accessible as the scheme that we have right now, which is really using more of the land, using this area outside of the building as a way of making kind of a nice way for somebody in a wheelchair or, just difficulty walking, getting into the building without having to use a handicap ramp to get up to the front door. I think everybody is sensitive now to the site that you're dealing with and how tight everything is, and kind of some of the challenges that come with the existing building configuration that you have. And so I think these are all, the points that have been brought up tonight. They're all good thoughts. I think we're happy to go back and study this further. And I think I hope that when we make comments like the ones that I'm making right now, that you don't take it the wrong way as if we're pushing back or, trying to talk you into something that you really don't want to do. This is your building. At the end of the day, you're the decision makers in this. I think we're just trying to share with you kind of our experience from, doing other libraries. And, we have the benefit of not having lived with the building that you have out there right now for as long as you have. So, we're able to come at this from, with kind of a different perspective. And, there's been a number of different ideas that have been suggested tonight. And I think it's great that people are taking that kind of imaginative way of, considering some of the challenges that are here. So.
The only thing I'll comment on, I know we were the infamous tree now here and where the drop off is. I agree. I don't know if we need 3 spots. I think that might be a question of one or two work. I don't know if I would this is my opinion. I don't know if I would try to cut into that buffer zone or that green space too, because if that was parking or a drop off area, like where that tree is, if somebody's backing out, then they could be backing out where the sidewalk is to get for the pedestrians, or again, into the entrance area or that loop. So I do like the buffer area. I just don't know if I like the tree there for the sight lines. So, but I think the question or the comment or the discussion of do we need 3 drop-off spots, I think that's probably probably more relevant. And then just in my personal opinion, I don't know if I would cut into the buffer itself. And then as far as the meeting rooms, again, my only concern with that, I'm okay where they're located. I just don't, the only little concern I have is if it was worth moving them, but I know the director is pretty adamant that it is worth it. So, I mean, I'm okay where there's either where they are existing or where they are on this west entry concept. So if trustees don't have any questions or other questions or comments, I probably want to ask 2 quick questions. Does anybody have like a preference on the roof or Treasurer Norton, do you have a question or a comment?
I just wanted to sneak one last,
Sure.
sort of thank you. I wanted to thank Don for reminding us about the South Side scheme, because, as I was starting to say, like, what else could be done? I know we looked at the South Side and I couldn't really recall why it wasn't ideal, but if there's any way that you guys could sleep on it and come up with a way to come up with a scheme on the south side that helps, I mean, that would centralize the entrance in a way that makes it closer to more of, the south and east parking, where there's a majority of the spaces. And but that's just my wish list. If someone could have a good dream about how and come up with that.
That was actually going to kind of be my second question, but so the first question was the roof line. Does anybody have a preference? Or Don, do we have to decide that tonight, or is that something we could play around with still?
No, and I think, this is, again, this is concept design. Ideally, there would be some kind of consensus about how to proceed with this as you move out of concept design and into schematic design. But I think it's also okay to not make that decision as part of concept design, and to say that that decision will be made as part of the next phase, which is in schematic design. I do think that it is worthwhile for us to take a look at, the effect that materials might have in terms of what those, the character of those 2 different schemes and what they might look at, what they might look like, just to help you understand it better. But I think if there is consensus for one over the other, we'd certainly like to hear that. If there's not at this point, if you feel like you need to, consider this a little bit more, that's perfectly fine as well.
All right, because I know Trustee Sullivan spoke at it earlier, but any of the other trustees a preference on the roof, or Secretary Swistak?
I prefer the flat, and it did help when I heard that it was more cost effective as well. but I preferred the look of it too. I felt like it was a cleaner look.
Anyone else, or is it Treasurer Norton?
Likewise for me on the flat.
I'm sorry. Treasurer Norton, then I'll go to Trustee Duffy. Treasurer Norton.
Okay, I just wanted to, say I don't have too much of a preference. I'm over practical, so where costs can be saved without, harming things from another standpoint, like aesthetics or safety, certainly safety, but then, aesthetics as a bonus, then I would go with that. But aesthetics is kind of at the bottom of the list for me, unfortunately. I apologize to the artistic people out there. For me, it's cost savings, practicality, safety, or three.
And Trustee Duffy.
Sorry.
That's okay.
The flat.
Okay. I don't have a preference myself personally. I don't know if everybody else is indifferent or has an opinion on the other trustees. All right, and then the second question is, and it kind of, I know it's been mentioned before, would the trustees want to see maybe a southeast entrance concept where it's close, or there might be, it's maybe more with the existing parking. I mean, I mean, I don't know how feasible it is, or
No.
Trustee Sullivan said no. Any,
When we visited Springfield, their parking was across the street. So I'm happy that we're not having a parking lot across the street. And I know that I think that West accommodates enough parking close enough.
okay. Anybody else? I know, well, anybody else with the southeast? No, nope. Vice President Bartelli was no.
No.
Treasurer Larson, no, or no? Okay. Treasurer Norton? No, no to a southeast? Or,
If it was to be on the south side, I mean, we all really kind of preferred west side. I'm
okay,
interested in the southwest idea, but not so much the east. There's so much of the staff space. All the iterations that we've come to at this point are really kind of, you know, not making a lot of possibility for southeast.
okay.
I see.
So anybody else with the, no, so are we pretty content at least still with the west entrance then, obviously, and try to work with that? Okay. Director Weinstein, you have anything to add, or Assistant Director McClellan even? Because I don't know if you wanted to comment at all on this.
I'm just going back to the, our original plan was to look at our address, which is Front Street, and the way that we came in. So I prefer the west entrance because that would be the closer to our address.
All right. And Director Weinstein, anything else?
Nothing new. I've given, I think I've added comments for today.
Okay. Don, Eric, or Graham, anything to add? Or want to wrap, or how, I don't know if you have anything else to add, or?
Oh, I think, you know, Graham, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think at the March board meeting, we will have cost information to share, right?
Yes.
I think there've been a number of issues that have been identified here. And I think, you know, we will focus on some refinements to the plan and also do a little bit of analysis that maybe increases comfort level with some of the issues that have been brought up here tonight. Eric, anything else you can think of?
No, we've covered a lot. You've given us something to think about.
It was a lengthy conversation, but it was
Yeah.
probably necessary, so.
Yeah.
No, it's better now.
Yeah. All righty. Well, nobody else has anything to add. We thank you guys for your time, and the presentation was well. I hope we got a lot of I know it was long, but hopefully it was worth it, so.
It was great seeing the 3D mock-ups. I think that really
Yeah.
helped.
That does help. That does start to help definitely visualize.
Okay,
Good.
good.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. How's everybody doing? Is there anybody need a break, or we want to go at least to the next item, or how's everybody doing? We all good? Keep moving? All right. So next item is 5A3, capital project statement discussion. Director Weinstein, do you want to start on this?
So last month, the board discussed the draft project statement, and you guys had some great suggestions. So I've included those suggestions within the second draft that's in the packet. And they include identifying details about why the library is renovating, and some better language about funding and financial. There's a statement about long-term financial savings versus band-aiding problems. And there's also a statement in there talks about advancing the library for a 21st century library. So I asked trustees to come with some edits so we can update our project, capital project page on the website. And I'm open to those edits.
All right. Anybody with questions? Secretary Swistak.
I just wanted to say thank you for all the hard work you've put into this. And at this point, as I have been reading through it. I did not see anything that I felt like needed to be adjusted or changed. So I'm good at where it is right now. But we'll see if any of the other trustees have anything to say. But thank you for all your hard work with us.
Anyone else with the question, comment, or anything? So are we good with this? We're good? All righty, so we're good. So good job, Director Weinstein. Yeah, what was it?
So that was that.
Good. Next item is committee reports. Finance Committee, Treasurer Norton.
Finance Committee met most recently on February 3rd. We reviewed the responses to the RFP for financial advisor. I think we all know the outcome of that. The board met immediately after the committee meeting, and they approved our recommendation. PMA, who spoke earlier this evening, and that's all I have in terms of an update at this point.
All right, thank you. 6B, Personnel Policy, Secretary Swistak.
The Personnel and Policy Committee will meet on Monday, March 8th at 7 p.m.
All right, thank you. 6C, Physical Plant, Vice President Bartelli.
Well, nothing to add, but I don't think at the last meeting, I thanked Assistant Director McQuillan for the update, the FQC review and update that you enclosed in the packet. That was much appreciated. Thank you.
All right, next is staff reports. 7A, Director's Report. Director Weinstein, you have anything to add to your Director's Report?
No, I don't. And I just wanted to mention, though, that we do have we're partnering with the food pantry, you mentioned this publicly, and we're accepting non-perishable food donations from February 15th through the 24th, and the box is in the library foyer. And I was invited to participate in an interview about mental health service systems that serve Lisle Township, so I was happy to be part of that conversation. And then the rest of my time's really been spent with CCS and the architects, and a little bit with PMA to bring this meeting forward. So, if there's any questions, I'll take them.
Any questions or comments on the Director's Report? Okay, so next is 7B, the Assistant Director's Report. Assistant Director McQuillan, anything to add to your report?
I don't have anything to add tonight.
All right, any questions or comments on the Assistant Trustee Sullivan?
Hey, Beth, I know that you probably told us this already. But I was wondering, I've probably forgotten this. Who is Jax Harris and Priority One?
Priority One is a cleaning company that we were getting a proposal from for budget purposes. And Jax Harris is a person's name who did a proposal on sort of like government purchasing and being able to put a proposal or an idea out there that you're looking for quotes on a site that's all accessible to many people.
Okay, great. And I had one other question. I know that we were in a meeting in the library. I don't remember if it was the last board meeting. The library kind of had a problem loading some of the stuff. It seemed like the internet connection was slow. Was there anything that we could do about that, speed it up?
That was either a Wi-Fi issue that we had in the meeting room here, and I think we will be addressing all of the technology on the renovation. That doesn't happen very often. And if you're talking about when the architects were here and they were trying to load something, that might have been on his end, actually. I'm not sure.
Oh, okay. Just was curious. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments for the Assistant Director?
Nope.
All righty. Then the next item is 8A, approve per capita grant. Can I get a motion to approve the per capita grant?
Motion to
I
approve.
move. Go ahead.
Who was it? Trustee Larson?
Motion to approve the per capita.
All right. Trustee, is a second?
Sullivan will second.
All righty. Director Weinstein, you want to explain this at all, or?
Sure. So this year, the Illinois State Library requires that trustees and staff read the entire Serving Our Public 4.0 and then address the checklists within each chapter. And the library has met or is in process of meeting the standards within the manual. And each year, the board approves submission of the grant.
All right. Any other questions or comments on the per capita grant? If not, Chris, can we have roll call, please?
Karen Larson. Aye. Liz Sullivan.
Aye.
Jenny Norton.
Aye.
Emily Swistak.
Aye.
Marguerite Bartelli.
Aye.
Thomas Duffy.
Aye.
Thomas Hummel.
Aye, motion passes. If nobody has an objection, I'll probably just go to the opportunity for trustees to speak, and then we'll do the executive session items. I'm just going to go alphabetically. Vice President Bartelli, anything?
I'm not sure if we requested this or not, Director Weinstein. Can we get a copy of those computer models of the buildings?
Yeah, I will request those. They are like SketchUp. I'm not sure if you're familiar, but SketchUp is like a 3D modeling program. But I can get some 2D like shots from the architects and then share them with the trustees. Yes.
That would be great. And then also, I want to say thank you very much for the curbside pickup during the bitter cold. It was welcome, to say the least. So thank you very much for that. That's it.
All right, thank you. Trustee Duffy.
So, I mean, unfortunately, I have a little bit of a sad thing, but I know we're still going through COVID, but I found out yesterday one of the people I went to grade school with, so she was 37, died of COVID within 24 hours of getting it, really healthy. So I know we're still not out of the woods here, and I just wanted to kind of mention that this was a fully healthy female my age. So definitely I hit the treadmill a little harder today. But I just wanted to kind of say, we'll mask up, wash those hands, and we'll get through it.
It's definitely still out there. I'll go next. The only thing I really wanted to say is when I was looking at the statistics page, I was actually kind of, the youth services, like the year to date is only down 1.45%. And actually the youth services print is actually up almost 6%. So even though we've been in COVID for most of the year, or actually all of the fiscal year, we're actually, at least for youth services, are doing not too bad. And then obviously like the digital media is up significantly, like 29%. And honestly, even total circulation being down 13%, I mean, it's not good, but it's not that bad, all things considering. I mean, obviously the programs are where we're taking the big hit as far as drops, which is obviously understandable. But as far as circulation goes, I mean, I don't think it's not great, but it's better than I would have expected with this going on. So that's all.
Seeing like 30% decreases, and there's a lot of kids at home, and
Sure.
getting materials in the house is important. Keep kids occupied.
All right, Trustee Larson.
No, I really don't have anything.
Okay, Treasurer Norton.
I just want to quickly add thanks specifically for the lightning fast response to my question at the last meeting about the license plate stickers program. We talked briefly about what we could maybe do to market it better, and pretty much, overnight it feels like we were adding to that signage on 53 and increasing awareness throughout the town. So much appreciated.
Trustee Sullivan.
I just want to say I can't wait till we do our renovation on the library. And I just appreciate everybody's commitment to the project. I think the questions are great. The fact that everybody is so aware and has done the homework and is so involved is just great, both on a staff perspective and on trustee perspective. So thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
All right, thank you. And Secretary Swistak.
I'd like to thank Treasurer Norton for the questions she asked PMA this evening. It really helped me understand it a little bit better because I do not have that financial head. So I appreciate that. And then I wanted to thank everyone else for all the hard work and the discussion this evening with the architects. It's really helpful, I think, to kind of hear where other people are and what we're thinking and how we're feeling about it. And all feeling like we have like we're a valued part of the team working on it. So I really appreciate that. And to the director and assistant director, thank you for continuing to offer the curbside services and for keeping staff and PPE and all that. I've come into the library more to pick up materials while still doing curbside pickup as well. And I'm really appreciative every time when I see staff and, welcoming me when I come in, and they all seem to have what they need as far as PPE goes, with masks and gloves and hand sanitizers and the plexiglass. And I feel very comfortable that they are in a safe working environment. So thank you for that as well.
Thank you for that comment.
All righty. So 8, B, and C will come back when we come back into open session. So can I get a motion for somebody to make a motion to go into closed session and read the citation?
I'll try it. I would like to try it. I'm a good reader, hopefully a good reciter. I move into executive session in accordance with 5 ILCS 120/2C21, discussion of minutes of meetings lawfully closed under this act, whether for purposes of approval by the body of the minutes or semi-annual review of the minutes as mandated by section 2.06.
Somebody want a second?
I'll second.
Trustee Larson. Before I ask for roll call, Director Weinstein, so how are we going to do this? Do we log out of this and then log into the other one, and then when we're done, we come back into this, or we keep this one open? How does that work?
I would recommend you could log out, just keep the link available, and then log into the executive session. It will take a minute or two for us to transfer over into executive session, and we'd like everybody at home to log in, and then the public, there is nobody in the public, but the public would be seeing a screenshot that shows the Lisle Library District is in executive session. So that's what they'll see versus so.
All right. So if there's anybody out there watching we don't know about, you stay on, and the rest of us will log off. So if there's no any questions or comments, roll call, Chris, to go into executive session.
Jenny Norton,
Aye.
Karen Larson,
Aye.
Liz Sullivan,
Aye.
Emily Swistek,
Aye.
Margaret Bartelli,
Aye.
Thomas Duffy,
Hi.
Thomas Humble.
Aye. We will go into executive session at 9:49. Being 10:12 p.m., we are back in open session. Can I have can I get a motion for 8B semi-annual review of executive session minutes? I don't know if anybody remembers the motion, but if not, I could say it again. Trustee Duffy.
I move to release the minutes of the executive session for June 17th, 2020, July 15th, 2020, August 12th, 2020, number 1, and August 12th, 2020, number 2.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Trustee Larson, any questions or comments? Roll call, please.
Thomas Duffy,
Aye.
Karen Larson,
Aye.
Emily Swistak,
Aye.
Marjorie Bartelli,
Aye.
Jenny Norton.
Aye.
Liz Sullivan,
Aye.
Thomas Hummel.
Aye. Motion passes. Next one is 8C, review of executive session recordings more than 18 months old. Can I get a motion, please?
Trustee Duffy. I move to destroy the recordings for February 13th, 2019 and August 14th, 2019.
All righty. Is there a second?
I'll second. Sullivan.
Trustee Sullivan seconds. Any questions or comments? If not, roll call, please, Chris.
Thomas Duffy,
Aye.
Liz Sullivan.
Aye.
Marjorie Bartelli,
Aye.
Karen Larson,
Aye.
Jenny Norton.
Aye.
Emily Swistak,
Aye.
Thomas Hummel.
Aye. Motion passes. Next item is motion to adjourn. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn. This is Sullivan.
Trustee Sullivan, is there a second?
Second, Duffy.
Second.
Duffy beat you. Just really quick, actually, Director Weinstein, for the closed session stuff that we got, just throw that away, or do you want that back or anything?
If you could shred it, please.
Okay. All right. If there's no other questions, comments, roll call. Chris, please.
Liz Sullivan,
Aye.
Thomas Duffy,
Aye.
Karen Larson,
Aye.
Jenny Norton,
Aye.
Emily Swistak,
Aye.
Marjorie Bartelli,
Aye.
Thomas Hummel.
Aye. Motion passes. We are adjourned at 10:15. Thank you very much, everybody. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.